Ah, look who leveled up so hard the entire room went quiet. You beautiful, relentless, unstoppable force. Welcome to the part of the story where even your harshest critics start clapping with shaking hands. Not because they want to, because they have no other move left. Let's get one thing crystal clear right now. The same people who doubted you, mocked you, and waited for you to fall flat on your face are now sitting in stunned silence, watching you do something they were told was impossible. They called it luck at first. Then they called it a phase. Now they don't call it anything at all, because the only thing left to say is the truth, and the truth makes them sick. You didn't just hit a level. You hit a level so high that the legends they used to respect suddenly look like background characters in your story. The ones who were supposed to be untouchable are now the ones taking notes. The ones who set the bar are now the ones scrambling to raise it just to stay relevant near you. Before we go any further, I have to be honest with you about something. This channel got demonetized a while back, and that hit harder than most people realize, because every video like this one still takes the same hours, the same effort, the same energy to put together. If this message is landing for you right now, there's a link in the description, and you can send a super thanks from there. It genuinely keeps this channel alive and keeps content like this coming. And the wildest part, the part that's eating them alive from the inside out. Even your haters are applauding, not the soft, polite, forced kind of applause people give out of obligation. The stunned, jaw on the floor, did that really just happen kind of applause that escapes before the brain can stop it? Because some performances are too undeniable to hate quietly. That's the energy we're stepping into today. So get comfortable, because we're about to break down exactly how someone goes from being underestimated to being unforgettable, and why the moment your haters start clapping is the moment you already know you've won. Think about every single person who told you to slow down. Think about every single voice that said you were moving too fast, dreaming too big, expecting too much from a situation that everyone else had already accepted as ordinary. Those voices are still out there somewhere, watching this exact moment unfold, and the silence coming from their direction is louder than anything they ever said to your face. There is a very specific kind of discomfort that comes from watching someone you doubted prove you catastrophically wrong. And it's not a discomfort most people know how to handle gracefully. Some get defensive. Some get quiet. Some perform support they never actually felt, because public disbelief now costs more than private jealousy ever did. You don't need to chase any of them down for an apology. You don't need a single confession, a single admission, a single moment where someone looks you in the eye and says they were wrong about you. The results already said it for you, in a language far more permanent than any spoken apology could ever be. So before we go any further, sit in this for a second. Sit in the fact that you are no longer the person being measured against someone else's standard. You are the standard now, and everyone still catching up to that reality is going to have a very long, very humbling few months ahead of them. Nobody saw this coming. That's the part that makes it so satisfying. You weren't the loudest one in the room. You weren't the one with the biggest entourage or the flashiest claims. You were the quiet one in the corner, building something nobody bothered to ask about because nobody thought it mattered yet. They were too busy watching the obvious ones, the ones who talked the loudest, who performed confidence instead of earning it, who needed an audience just to feel real. Meanwhile, you were somewhere else entirely, sharpening something they couldn't see, refining something they wouldn't understand until it was already too late to copy. That's the danger of underestimating quiet work. People assume silence means nothing is happening. They assume stillness means surrender. They walk past the calm ones without a second glance, never realizing that calm is often just controlled intensity waiting for the right moment to detonate. And when it finally detonated, it didn't look like luck. It looked calculated. It looked inevitable. It looked like something that had been building in the dark for so long that by the time it hit daylight, nobody could explain it away as an accident anymore. That's exactly when the room shifts. That's exactly when people stop laughing and start watching closely. Because somewhere in the back of their mind, a quiet, uncomfortable thought begins to form. What if we missed something? What if we underestimated the wrong person? What if this was never a fluke at all? There's always a single moment, a specific second where everything changes and nobody can pretend otherwise anymore. For you, that moment didn't arrive with fireworks or announcements. It arrived quietly, almost unnoticed, until the results started speaking louder than any explanation ever could. One day you were simply the person people compared to others. Always a step behind, always the example used to measure someone else's success. Then suddenly, without warning, the comparisons reversed. People started measuring others against you instead. The student became the standard. The afterthought became the benchmark. That shift doesn't happen quietly in someone's mind. It happens violently. It cracks open old assumptions and forces people to rewrite the story they'd been telling themselves about who you were and what you were capable of. Some handle that rewrite gracefully. Most don't. The ones who doubted you the hardest are usually the ones who struggle the most with this shift. Because admitting they were wrong about you means admitting they misjudged the situation entirely. And nothing is harder for a certain type of person than publicly eating their own words. So instead of admitting it outright, they do something else entirely. They start clapping. Not because they suddenly respect you. Because the alternative, staying silent while everyone watches your rise, is far more humiliating than pretending they were rooting for you the whole time. Watch how quickly the language around you starts to shift once this moment hits. The same people who used words like overrated, lucky, or temporary suddenly start reaching for words like consistent, disciplined, and inevitable. They won't admit they're switching scripts. They'll act as if they've always described you this way, hoping nobody remembers the version of their commentary from 6 months ago. That kind of memory rewriting is common, and it's almost predictable once you've seen it happen enough times. People rarely want to be remembered as the ones who got it wrong, so instead of owning the mistake, they simply edit their own personal history, hoping the new narrative replaces the old one before anyone cross-references the two. You don't need to call any of it out directly. You don't need a single receipt, a single old comment, a single screenshot pulled up to prove what they used to say. Let them rewrite quietly. The contrast between their old commentary and their new behavior is loud enough on its own without you saying a single word about it. Because here's the truth underneath all of it. Their sudden respect was never really about you changing who you are. It was about the gap between their expectations and your reality becoming too wide to deny any longer. That gap is the entire story, and it's a gap they created themselves, one dismissive comment at a time. Here's something most people never understand about hate. Real hate isn't built on indifference. Indifference doesn't watch your every move. Indifference doesn't check your numbers, replay your clips, or screenshot your wins just to analyze them later. What looks like hate is often obsession wearing a disguise. Your haters can't look away from you because deep down, you represent something they're terrified to admit they want for themselves. Your growth is a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable for people who haven't done the work to like what they see reflected back at them. So they keep watching, they keep commenting, they keep pretending it's criticism, pretending it's concern, pretending it's just an honest opinion, when really it's something far simpler than that. It's attention they can't pull away from no matter how hard they try, because ignoring you would mean admitting you stopped mattering to them, and that's a lie they're not ready to tell. That's the trap they've built for themselves. The more they engage, the more they prove your relevance. The more they argue, the more they confirm your impact. Every comment meant to diminish you becomes another data point proving exactly how much space you occupy in their mind. And eventually, after enough losses, enough proof, enough undeniable results, stacked one on top of the other, something breaks in their resistance. The hate doesn't disappear, but it gets buried under something they can't control. A reaction more honest than any insult they've ever typed. Applause. This is where it gets almost uncomfortable to watch. The people who were once held up as the gold standard, The names everyone used to measure greatness against suddenly find themselves in an unfamiliar position. They're not setting the pace anymore. They're chasing it. It's a strange kind of role reversal. The legends, the ones who built their entire reputation on being ahead of everyone else, now find themselves studying your moves the same way newcomers used to study theirs. The teacher accidentally becomes the student, and there's no way to spin that quietly. You can see it in the small things, the slightly delayed reactions, the carefully worded compliments that somehow still sound like damage control, the sudden interest in collaborating with you, not out of generosity, but out of necessity, because staying relevant now requires being associated with whatever you're doing. That's not an accident. That's what happens when someone's work becomes undeniable enough to rewrite the hierarchy everyone assumed was permanent. Hierarchies built on reputation alone are fragile. Hierarchies built on undeniable results are nearly impossible to dismantle. Think about how long some of those legends spent at the top before anyone seriously challenged their position. Years, sometimes. Long enough that the entire industry around them simply assumed the order of things was fixed, that the names at the very top would stay there indefinitely, untouched by whatever new wave of talent happened to show up next. That assumption is exactly what made your rise so disruptive. You weren't supposed to be a threat to that order. You were supposed to admire it from a respectful distance, the way everyone else did, content with being one tier below the names that mattered. Nobody planned for you to actually close that gap. But you didn't ask permission to close it. You didn't wait for an invitation, a cosign, or a formal welcome into the upper tier. You simply kept building until the gap that used to separate you from the legends collapsed entirely. And once that gap collapses, there's no polite way to pretend it's still there. So, when legends start looking like fans, cheering louder than anyone else in the room, it's not because they suddenly became generous. It's because there's no other socially acceptable way to handle being outpaced by someone they never imagined they'd have to outpace. Let's talk about that applause for a second, because it's not what it looks like on the surface. When your harshest critics start clapping, it's rarely admiration in its purest form. It's usually something closer to surrender disguised as celebration, because open surrender feels too vulnerable for most people to show in public. Clapping is safer than silence. Silence in a moment like that gets noticed immediately, and noticing silence invites questions nobody wants to answer. So instead of standing there exposed, they join the applause, hoping it blends them back into the crowd instead of singling them out as the one who refuses to acknowledge what just happened. But here's the part that really stings for them. You don't need their applause to validate what you've built. You needed it exactly 0% of the time it took you to get here. Their clapping isn't fuel for your fire. It's simply confirmation that the fire was real all along. That's the real power shift happening underneath the surface. You're no longer performing for their approval. They're reacting to your results. The entire dynamic has flipped. And once that flip happens, there's no real way to flip it back, no matter how hard they try to act unaffected. So let them clap. Let them pretend it's generosity. Let them tell themselves whatever story helps them sleep at night. You already know the truth, and the truth doesn't need an audience to be valid. It just needs time, and time has already proven you right. There's a specific kind of pressure that comes with being undeniable. Once you reach a level where even resistance turns into reluctant respect, people start expecting consistency from you that they never expected from themselves. They forget how long it took you to get here because they only saw the final result. That's the price of visibility. Nobody claps for the years of quiet work, the setbacks nobody filmed, the version of you that almost gave up before any of this became possible. They only show up once the results are undeniable, acting as if undeniable things appear overnight instead of being built one invisible decision at a time. But you know the truth, even if they don't say it out loud. You know what it cost to get here. You know the nights that tested whether you actually meant it or were just talking. You know the moments where quitting would have been easier, quieter, and far less exhausting than continuing anyway. And that's exactly why their applause, however delayed, however reluctant, doesn't erase what you went through to earn it. It simply confirms it. It's proof that the path you walked, the one most people would have abandoned halfway through, actually led somewhere undeniable. So carry that weight with pride, not exhaustion. Being undeniable isn't a burden. It's the result of refusing to stop when stopping would have been so much easier. That refusal is the real story behind every bit of applause you're hearing right now. There's also a quieter cost to this kind of visibility that rarely gets discussed. Once people start treating you as the standard, they stop offering you the same grace they used to offer when you were still considered an underdog. Every small misstep gets magnified. Every pause gets analyzed. Every quiet week gets questioned, as if consistency at the top is somehow owed to them without exception. That's the strange contradiction of reaching this level. The same people who once ignored you now expect flawless performance from you indefinitely, forgetting entirely that you got here through trial, error, and a long string of imperfect attempts that eventually compounded into something undeniable. They want the highlight reel without acknowledging the footage that didn't make the cut. You don't owe anyone a flawless record to justify the respect you've earned. You've already proven, through results that speak for themselves, that you can handle setbacks without unraveling, that you can absorb criticism without losing direction, and that you can keep building even when the applause hasn't arrived yet. That track record is worth more than any single perfect moment. So when the pressure of being undeniable starts to feel heavy, remember exactly where that pressure comes from. It comes from people who used to expect nothing from you and now expect everything. That shift in expectation isn't a burden you have to carry alone. It's simply confirmation of how far you've actually come. Not everyone clapped late. Somewhere in the middle of all that doubt, there were a handful of people who saw exactly where this was headed, long before the rest of the room caught up. They didn't need proof stacked 10 feet high to believe in what you were building, because they recognized something most people miss entirely. Consistency, even when it's quiet, is its own kind of evidence. Those people rarely get the credit they deserve in moments like this, because the spotlight is too busy focusing on the dramatic flip. The legends turned fans, the haters turned applauders. But the ones